Welcome to our first YouTube video of level 9. So today we're going to start talking about evaluating sources. If you took level 7 here at Fanshawe, you had to write a research essay in level 7. And so you did a little bit of this. Like, we talked about what is a good source and what is a not good source, or the words we used then was what is a reliable source and what is an unreliable source. So we got, just as a review, these are the basic things we learned in level 7. So, first of all, what I mean by a source is any source of information that we are going to use in our research to support our main ideas. So if we're writing a research paper about student stress, then we're going to need to go and find some sources, some other documents that are going to give us factual information, statistics, stats and facts, basically, from other sources to make our arguments stronger. But there's a lot of confusing information out there in the world, especially now that we have access to the internet. So today we're going to review what we did in level 7, and then we're going to take it like the next step up, because now you guys are level 9 and we need to start looking at things from a higher academic level. Okay. So we learned in level 7 that checking the date of your source is really important. It's not, as we're going to talk about a little bit later, it's not the most important thing. It really depends on the topic. But generally the rule is if research or something was written closer to the present, then the information is going to be more relevant, definitely. Because as we know, research changes. Like, lots of the things we probably learned in school when we were young, some of those things are not true anymore, or we have learned more about them. So checking the date is really, really important. We want new-ish information. Like, if you're doing research about stress and your paper is from 1977, that's probably not the most reliable source. But if your research is from 2018, this is probably much better. That being said, there's some topics where there hasn't been a lot of change, or maybe you are looking at a historical perspective, meaning you are interested in maybe the change that happened in a topic over the last 40 years. So therefore, the date is still important, but you can look at older sources, because you can say, oh, well, in 1977, we thought this about stress, but we were wrong. Now I want to compare it to this research in 2018. So this rule that we taught you in level 7, where it's like only new sources are good, this is not always totally true in higher levels. Okay. Next question. Is it from an open source? And this is what we call websites like Wikipedia. Wikipedia is beloved by students because it is an easy place to go and get a lot of information about a topic. Unfortunately, Wikipedia is what we call open source, meaning anybody can contribute to this webpage, and no one really fact checks. Like, no one checks if the facts are correct. If you're into like celebrities, celebrities often say that their Wikipedia pages are incredibly incorrect. And that's like a problem for them, because interviewers will read their Wikipedia page before an interview and then ask them questions about things that they find there. And these celebrities and sports figures and stuff say, like, listen, these are just fans who make these pages, they're not actually real factual information. So Wikipedia is a bad idea. And if you use Wikipedia as a source from now until the end of your academic career, your professors will not take you seriously. Like, it's not a serious, reliable source. And this is true for any open source information. So there's lots of great websites where like anyone can contribute an article. For example, there's a website called medium.com. And Medium is great. There's lots of great articles on there. However, it is open source. Now, so when you're in level 7, we say absolutely no open source. But now I'm going to tell you that sometimes open sources are a good place to start. You don't use them as your source, but start there to get a general idea. And often these open sources will have references, and then you can use their reference page as a place for you to go and find other information. So open source sites can be a starting point for research. Never use them as the actual source of research you use in your essay, but if you go to the Wikipedia page and check out their reference page, then that could be a good place to go and find like good references. Because just because they used references on the Wikipedia page does not mean that the references they used are bad. It just means the Wikipedia page itself is not good. So, open source, instead of saying no open source, we're going to say we can use open sources as a starting point for finding better sources, better research. Okay. The next thing we teach you in level 7 is it from a reputable source? I don't know if I spelled this correctly. That might be an A. Reputable? I don't know. Something you need to know about me, I have terrible spelling. I know I'm an English teacher, but I learned how to spell in French first, and it ruined my spelling for the rest of my life. So if you see a spelling mistake in anything that I give you, just forgive me. Okay. Is it from a reputable source? Meaning, does the source have a good reputation? And this can be a difficult thing to determine if you are doing research in another language, because maybe a good reputation is very cultural. Like, it means in my culture, do we know that, like, everybody thinks this is a good source? So examples of reputable sources are like government websites, international bodies like the UN or UNESCO or the World Health Organization. So these kind of like big international bodies tend to be really good sources of information. Government websites, now that's not always true. It depends on your government. Canadian government websites are usually good, but not every country has a government that gives you good, reliable information. Some countries, the government is giving you very, very biased information that's making the country themselves look better than it actually is. An example I can think about this is how China reports its air pollution. So often Chinese government will say, oh, there's very little air pollution, but the people actually living in the cities are like, no, there is a lot of air pollution. But the government does not want to publish the real statistics because it makes them look bad. So you've got to be careful with some government websites. Okay. Also in Canada, most of our news sources, like the CBC, are really reputable news sources. And then there's like different magazines. In the lab, the Evaluating Sources lab that I put up today, when you look at it, there's a list at the bottom of like reputable news sources, like different magazines and newspapers and news websites that have a good reputation, because that is something that is difficult for international students to know. Okay. And then finally, are they selling something? So we teach this in 11-7. Like, if you go to a website and it's an article about how good chocolate is for your health, and then they are selling you some chocolate, that's probably not a great source because they're going to be biased. And we're going to talk about this in the next section. Okay, so these are the review of what we learned in level 7, but we are learning now that these things are not so black and white. There is a little bit more like nuance. So check the date. New sources are good, but also depends on your topic and what you are doing. Is it from an open source? Maybe. Don't use the open source as a source for your paper, but maybe use the open source as a place to begin looking for other sources that are more reputable. Is it a reputable source? Ask around if you don't know. Like, ask me. Ask English people. Ask your professor. It's okay to not know if a source is reputable or not. Sometimes you'll see a website and it looks really good and you're like, this looks great, but then you can show it to me and I'll be like, no, that's terrible. Don't listen to them. They are biased. So if you don't know, ask. Okay. And are they selling something generally? That's a bad idea. Don't use a website where they're selling something. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video and clean my board. And my next section is going to be about bias. Okay, have to remember how to do this. I'll be back in a minute. Hi, I'm back. Okay, so we're going to talk about bias in information. Bias is a noun, but when we want to describe something like an article or some information, or a person, we can say biased with an ED at the end. So you're going to hear me use both of these, like this article contains bias, noun form, or that person or that article or that information is biased. So both are very common. Okay, so I need to get more comfortable. Okay, so basically there's like two kinds of information in the world. There are facts, and then there's subjective information. So fact is like the sun rises in the east. This is a fact. This is true for me and true for you and true everywhere. Something subjective is like this. So this is a piece of art that my daughter made. For me, this is the most beautiful thing in the world because my beautiful, perfect child made it. For me, I am incredibly biased because it is my child, my daughter, and everything I think she makes is beautiful. But if I go and show this to a stranger in the street and I say, what do you think about this owl painting? They might say, that is the ugliest thing I have ever seen. And that is their opinion, but they don't have any bias because they don't know who made it. They don't need to please me. They don't need to they have no connection to this information. They're just giving an opinion. So you have to be really careful about where information comes from and what are people's reasons for feeling the way that they do about the information they give. So when I say to you, do you want to buy this? It is actually $500 because my beautiful, perfect daughter made it and she is a genius. That information is very biased. I am not a good person to make a price for this piece of art. A better idea would be give it to somebody who is an art dealer who does not know me and does not know my daughter, and they will look at it and say, this is worth like $5, right? And that is an unbiased opinion. So information can be biased or unbiased. So the definition of bias is when the information is presented like it is a fact, but actually it's being used, that information and how you feel about that information is being used to benefit someone or something. It's just like the example that I gave before about the chocolate, right? So if a chocolate company pays for a study that says, they're like, listen, if you can do a study and you can make the results show that chocolate is good for your health, we'll pay you $1 million. And so that research company says, oh, okay. So then they do some research and they have some results, and the results say chocolate's good for your health, and they publish it and they get $1 million. That is not fact. That is biased. And when we're talking about bias, we need to always ask the question, hold on. We need to always ask the question, who paid for the research? This is a very good question. And it's not that difficult to find sometimes. Also, you have to be careful of language that shows something as a fact and not as something that is up for discussion. So if you read something that says, for example, autism is caused by vaccines, this information is presented like it is a fact, right? So if you read an article and the article says, in conclusion, autism is caused by vaccines. First of all, this is not true. Second of all, this language is the way this language is written has been used to like manipulate the way you think about the information. So when you read this,